So visualize the merit field with Buddha Shakyamuni in the center, the space above ourselves, flanked by his disciples through the ages to the present time. Bringing to mind their qualities, the body, speech and mind, particularly the mental qualities of perfections and those of the bodhisattvas in their respective advanced stages of development. Particularly be reminded of the efforts that they made persistently, consistently through lifetimes. Motivated by their aspirations. In the case of arhats, being disenchanted by the samsaric existence, motivating them to be free from suffering, free from the cycle of birth and death, controlled by the afflictions. Thus also showing us the possibility of transformation if we really aspire for it. In the case of the bodhisattvas, their efforts for even longer periods, motivated by the sole concern for others. And that of the Buddhas, having fully realized the aspiration of bodhicitta, landed themselves in this state of full awakening with all the mental qualities, positive qualities, having reached full consummate awakening. Thus fully accomplished in terms of their own aims, at the same time fully accomplished in terms of the aims of others, at least on their part. There is nothing lacking in being of true benefit to all sentient beings. Think of fellow sentient beings surrounding us, in human forms yet undergoing their own respective general samsara and specific samsaric predicaments. Think of how arhats and the bodhisattvas, the Buddhas, began exactly like us. Thus filled with hope for oneself and for others, coupled with our reflection on our shared aspirations, dependency on each other, plus our Buddha nature, feel ever enthused to make the most of this time at hand by having this long-term aim of working for Buddhahood, for the sake of all sentient beings, towards which we will make this session as meaningful as possible. First and foremost, with our motivation, positive, wholesome, together with our efforts through the session in making the most of it. Generate a mental attitude, mental state of love, compassion, sense of empathy going towards all sentient beings, as well as inspiration, reverence, admiration, awe going towards arhats, bodhisattvas, and buddhas. Once again, renew the bodhicitta attitude. Try to infuse this spirit of bodhicitta with a sense of rational behind it, the possibility of it, and some idea of how to go about pursuing it. With these aspects, feel once again determined to work for the attainment of full awakening for the sake of all sentient beings. And that this session may contribute to the realization, eventually, of full awakening. Okay, so today we'll try to wrap up this session by 3:45 at the latest. At the latest, did I say that? Since we have tight schedule. Before I touch on a fresh topic for this session, I want to revisit our last session wherein I shared about the historical aspect of how Buddhism, after Buddha passed away, was passed on, at least the charge of it passed on at least through 7 generations in a very systematic way. By the way, did any of you succeed in finding any online material on that? Have you? No? So I was trying to find online material on it. I couldn't find. I was using a Tibetan text, but online-wise, maybe I wasn't savvy enough to come up with terms to find it. I typed patriarch, hierarch, in charge. I didn't succeed. Anyway, I was wondering, I didn't get much time, but I would be interested to find it in standard Pali text also. The 7, we call them the 7 therapy. What would be an English term for that? Have you can you come up with? Terap is generations of masters to whom the charge of the teaching was passed on. Te means to give, to pass on, and what is being passed on is the charge of looking after the teaching, and kind of, and in a way it happened as I mentioned last time. It happened that for the first 7 generations, it was passed on to the next one by saying who he has to pass it on to. And very often the person who he has to pass on would not be even born by that time, most of the time. So it's quite amazing to see how that happened. And I suspect for all the 7, it might have been the case of kind of really naming who the next person would be that he has to pass on. And then after the 7th, there was no clear-cut line of such masters. So someone was bringing in Nagarjuna in it, but I don't know if that would be authentic or not, because mainly the generations of masters to whom the charge was being passed on were masters commonly belonging to the more general public level of Dharma. So would be at least outwardly seen as Nyentu, Sravaka masters, Arhats. I'm saying in the public because there's even this mention of, in the Mahayana text, the mention of Ananda being a bodhisattva, and likewise with others. Anyway, so, and then regarding the names of them, I think I misspoke about the Sanskrit rendition for the last one, Lektong Chembo, whose name should be Sudarshan. Sudarshan. Yeah, Sudarshan. Meaningful to behold. Yeah. Beneficial to behold. Sudarshan Lektong, not Lektenche. Okay, but I would encourage you to look up many materials on that, particularly from authentic Pali texts. I suspect I have not discussed this with any of the masters, nor have I been involved in any such exploration, but it just occurred to me how prevalent, it must be prevalent, popular, there's no doubt about it, except I haven't come across any materials. But online I could not find even. So luckily I have a Tibetan text which is solely put together around them. Okay, that's it. I wanted to discuss this topic of Depa in Tibetan, but it's difficult to capture it completely in English. We have been using the term reverence, faith. Is faith something you are comfortable with? I see. But unless it is unpacked, it can be misunderstood, right? So, but in the context of Guru, reliance on Guru, we speak of these 2 qualities, Depa and Kupa. There we mostly use reverence, admiration, respect. Pardon? Not devotion. Devotion is not the preferred term, because it's even more rife with possibility of misinterpretation. Yes. I see. Conviction will be, as I understand. Let's unpack it. Then we'll see, right? What best term? Because I think in the afternoon, the recitation that we did today, what was that about? The four songs of mindfulness, right? So there, mindfulness without reverence to the master. We were saying reverence and admiration. It has some resonance with it, but basically, in relation to the cultivation of reliance on masters, we basically speak of these two qualities, Depa and Gupa. Gupa is more like respect, so it will be more like reverence. But Gupa, more specifically, not just reverence, but Gupa, reverence born of this awareness of their kindness. Mm-hmm.
In Venerable's Lamrim outline, she uses gratitude and respect for Gupa.
Gratitude and respect together.
Yeah, together, gratitude and respect because of reflecting on their kindness.
Yes, that's definitely capturing the actual meaning of it. So, respect out of gratitude. Respect out of gratitude for their kindness. So the Tibetan term is Gupa. Gupa generally means respect, but respect not just out of a blue, but respect grounded in appreciation of the kindness of the Guru. And then the other quality is the other quality to be cultivated by the students in shoring up their shoring up the strength of their reliance on the Guru is Depa, and that is that might not be conviction per se. Conviction has more of a cognitive flavor of kind of ascertainment, of being certain about something. So mostly conviction would be kind of a either experience generated, or it could be reflection, reasoning, understanding generated. But by itself, when we land on conviction, it would more, maybe not necessarily always, but more, lean towards a cognitive component, cognitive aspect. But Depa here, I think, has more of a emotional component, but it is born of dwelling on the qualities of the master. So a sense of, in a way, it is a combination, I think. It's a combination of inspiration, inspired by their quality. But it has a meaning of being moved by the vastness of their qualities. It could be understanding, but not just confined to that. It could be inner cultivations, and then their conduct. It could be their qualities of body, speech, and mind. And dwelling on that, one develops this sense of what we call faith. But as it is clear, this kind of a faith has to be grounded or developed, founded on this appreciation of the qualities of the master. So that would be Tepa towards the master. But then we also speak of Tepa towards the law of karma. then there's the Tepa. So there's more, that has more of a leaning of conviction in the working of law and laws. There also we use the term Tepa. And then of course Tepa towards the objects of refuge. So that would be what? Faith in, trust in, more of a trust. So Tepa is something that cannot be captured by one term. But it is so crucial from a Buddhist perspective. It is the forerunner of all the virtues. So there's this need of really situating it and capturing it completely, or as wholly as possible, and not confine it to just one term. Maybe terms need to be changed in the context. So there is a sutra called Kunjo Talala. I don't know how to translate it into English. Kunjo Talala. I don't know. Kunjo is refuge. Talala. I don't know. Okay, let's call it refuge. Talala. Actually, it is Talale Sung. Darani of refuge. Talala. I don't know. So anyway, there's a sutra where this is very popular and it's very often quoted and memorized to remind oneself of the need of working on cultivating Tepa. And it's something that it's a precursor. It's a precursor to all the positivities. And it protects and enhances all the qualities. It also helps in clearing away doubts. It's almost like a boat that can take us across the sea, across the water body. Telek Tongkye Chunji. Tepa is like the banner which signals an abode or a place of residence of joy and auspiciousness. It has this quality of clearing our mind of all unnecessary dirts. So it does that work. It keeps our arrogance in place, or it puts it down. It abandons because you have this Tepa born of your appreciation of the qualities of the Master which far exceed yours. Then when you are in that state of being, then it has this quality of undermining any prospect of being arrogant. And then it's quite telling. It says that it is the root for this spirit of reverence, for this spirit of respect. Partly because of reflecting on the qualities of the Master, you see the prospect of how you can benefit from it. And thus, right then and there, even if not thinking of any actual incidents of being benefited by the Master, you see the prospect of being benefited. And that itself is enough to generate a sense of reverence. So it's the root of reverence. Among all the wealth, Tepa, when we count the 7 wealth, not the worldly wealth, but spiritual wealth, we count Tepa among them. But it says that it is the wealth, the treasure, the supreme treasure, the supreme wealth. It's like the best of the vehicles. Here in the text it says Kangpa, foot, but I'm using the term vehicle. It's the best of the vehicles to get you where you want to go. And it's like a hand that can gather all virtues, right? So to that extent, Tepa is so extolled, so held high, and it is very often called the precursor of all the qualities. So thinking along these lines, one has to kind of come up with what this Tepa might be, particularly in the absence of one particular word that can capture it, and to really work on it, because that can be an assurance to kind of giving rise to all other qualities. So very often when we use the term faith, there's this misunderstanding, or at least to those who are informed about Buddhism, they would think that that doesn't sit well with what Buddhism actually stands for and what Buddhism actually involves. It involves reasoning, exploring, and not taking things blindly. Although, for those who have not yet developed that strength of intellect, reasoning, and whatnot, for them, Tepa, even as in almost blind faith or kind of a giving the advantage, the doubt, kind of faith is helpful, but it can only take one only so far, but not. Say in terms of the path, structured path, Tepa can at the best take at the very tip of the path of accumulation, not beyond that, not even into path of preparation, but just at the tip of the path of accumulation. And then, unless one generates understanding, reasoning, and which is the faculty of intellect is not something given. It's not something either you have or don't have. From a Buddhist perspective, that can also be developed, generated, developed, whatnot. So one has to then make effort in generating it, developing it, so that one could then continue to move forward. Otherwise, one would be stuck. So, even allowing that there can be some times when not so well informed or not informed at all, kind of a faith, kind of being naively trusting might be helpful, but that's not the preferred way if one has the option, and nor does it take one any far. So in that respect, we speak of Tepa in three forms, right? Tepa, Tangwe Tepa, that is faith in the form of inspiration, where you look at the qualities and you feel kind of uplifted by their qualities. Though you may not have them, but you feel uplifted, and your mind kind of is in awe, in kind of a appreciation, in kind of awe, seeing the qualities of others. Then you begin to develop some sense of trust in the other person because of their quality. That's another Tepa, Ichek Tepa. I think if translated literally, it will mean faith of belief, but I think it's more of a faith of trust, faith of trusting. Now you trust in that person because you now have seen the qualities. Before that, you are in awe, in a sense of upliftment, in a sense of appreciation. And then following the sense of trusting, then comes the third Tepa, Gunduki Tepa. The Tepa of faith of wanting to develop them, faith of wanting to accomplish those qualities yourself. So we usually speak of Tepa in those three terms, and none of these three are specifically about blind faith. But at the same time, Tepa is so crucial So one has to really find one's hand around it, kind of hand understanding about it, so that 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 awareness of cultivating it or looking whether one has that or not could be done. So it's very crucial. But to confine it to one term or the other, it would be, at least in my experience, so up to this point in English, that may be misleading. So that might miss out on some aspects of it. So that's the reason why I was presenting these different facets of it. Even in standard texts, we speak of two approaches or two ways that students can take on the path, at least to begin with. We call that Wangdu Tebe. The low faculty, the low faculty students, the low faculty practitioners take this. They follow the path. They follow the path of faith. The sharp faculty practitioners follow the path of what we call Dharma, but I think it is, informed Dharma. So even the scriptures allow for that, but the preferred one is to be able to follow the way of the sharp faculty practitioners by being informed and basing one's trust, faith, and longing on an understanding on an understanding. So just to give you an example, in the case of bodhisattvas, depending on which category they belong, they would have this difference in approach of what to practice first between bodhicitta and the wisdom to understanding emptiness. In the case of the sharp faculty member practitioners, they first approach the wisdom of understanding emptiness. Based on that, they develop even stronger trust and stronger conviction in the benefit and the relevance of bodhicitta. And then they then follow then they develop bodhicitta afterwards. So that would be a case of someone who would have understood emptiness, realized emptiness, of course not directly, but inferentially, before embarking on the path of accumulation. But then in the case of the faith-based or faith-propelled, faith-driven practitioner, say if they are bodhisattva inclined, Mahayana inclined, their approach would be first to generate bodhicitta, and then following that, with no choice but to pursue the understanding of emptiness. But there too, I think it cannot be completely faith in a complete blind faith sense, but rather kind of a more percentage of reliance and trust in the teaching, rather than being able to really figure it out yourself. Although to a certain extent one maybe, but mainly to be trusting in the Buddha's teaching, in your teacher's teaching. Of course, not completely naively blind faith, but based not on self-generated, informed understanding, but of kind of observation of the integrity, the practice, conduct, inspirations. I'm kind of working one's way around the informed understanding. Anyway, I wanted to bring this up, this part about Deva, and at least for my part, alert you that maybe there is no one single English term to capture it. But that's the challenge. And so I wanted to present that. So, yeah, another thing I wanted to bring up. So this session will be a session of hodgepodge. Let's see if we could make a good stew out of it. Another thing is shingitu. Shingitu. What would be shingitu? Shing. Pardon? Shing. Usually we use the term shing field of merit, right? But we use that for. But we use that for referring to fields of merit, more specifically in exclusion of the sentient beings. We could say sentient beings are as much of a field of merit as the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas are. But when we are using this term, Shingitu, by the power of Shing, by the power of field, we are referring to power of field of reverence, power of field of respect. So Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Arhats, those, right? So what I meant to bring up by this is to make awareness of them and respect to them, kind of make them as much of a part of one's own cultivation, not just to think of I'm doing it all by myself. Although there may be Buddhas that I refer to, but they are not part of the practice itself. So sometimes we can think of we may fall into doing that, particularly with this hype that Buddhism is so rational, logical, some common sense, whatnot. We might be carried away by this, thinking that I have nothing to do with Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. I'll just read and then do it all by myself. Sometimes we could go into that extreme. But I was thinking of bringing this topic of how there is as important role of the fields of merit in the form of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Arhats, to be involved in one's practice. Particularly when one feels low. Then that would be good to resort to them, bring them to your mind and make them part of your practice in terms of relating to them, in terms of I think to make it clear without using too many words, make it clear. You may remember there is this in Lamrim Chemo, this I think this is within the topic of Jamdo, refuge, particularly involving making offerings to the objects of refuge, revering them. There is this specific mention in Lamrim where it says, sometimes when you feel so low, so much so, that when you are trying to memorize something, you don't get it done, you want to reflect on something, nothing comes out, and you want to really meditate, don't go any far, kind of feel stuck. That's when these fields of merit can come handy. Like very common, in a common sense, I mean, if you feel low, it would be good if you have some trustworthy student, friends, teachers to go to and open up. Likewise, even without that also, you could just bring in this remembrance of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and almost kind of sit in a meditation session with them. Sometimes our mind can open up when we kind of open ourselves to them and kind of trust ourselves to them, saying like, here, please, here, the plate is with you. I cannot get anything on it. I can share your story, but not by being so explicit about all the details, okay? I was in kind of a dilemma in how to get something done. But fortunately at that time, not for me, for somebody else, but who was very totally reliant on me and to getting it done. There's no way that person can get it done by themselves. But so they were just entrusting me with that, and I have a sense of responsibility. But at the same time, I didn't know what to do. It needs to be done. It needs to be fixed, but didn't know anything. I specifically said in meditation every day for the next for almost 10 days or so. The first thing I woke up, I would remember Buddha. And actually, in this case, because of the person for whom I'm doing this, who is very, very faithful who has very great faith in Padmasambhava, Guru Padmasambhava, like the second Buddha. So then I called him in my practice and then do the mantra recitation. Totally entrusting without holding back anything. Out of course, faith in the qualities of the Padmasambhava, who is no other than the Buddha himself in terms of his qualities. That's quite evident in his writings also, including that of Madhyamika, etc. On top of his tantric powers and whatnot. So there was no shortage of that. Yet at the same time, I was kind of also making sure that I was not holding back anything, and I kind of set in. I opened my mind. It's almost like a blank slate for him to write something. It happened. It clicked. I mean, one day it just clicked. An idea entered into me. And there was no doubt whatsoever. That was sure to solve the problem. No doubt at all. Okay, I had my breakfast set off to get that done. In the same day, it got cleared. So when one has difficulty not making any progress, feeling stuck, kind of a stagnant situation, then even Tsongkhapa very clearly says, when such things happen, it is my special instruction, special advice. Menga is usually translated as instruction, but here it has a sense of closeness, a close advice from a trusted person, right? Trusted teacher. Is saying that when you find yourself in such situation, depending on the power of merit, power of the field of merit is my secret advice. So, and then you may be very, very aware of this statement in Lamrim Chemo, which we have difficulty wrapping our head around, where it says, that when you have not yet generated when you have not yet generated so powerful antidote against attachment to worldly pleasures, and when one doesn't have strong understanding of emptiness, and one doesn't have this strength of familiarization with bodhicitta. Under such situation, whatever virtues you succeed in pulling up, they cannot go far. At the most they can lead to of course positive situations just within samsara. They cannot generate any any uh, any virtue that is strong enough to really kind of generate any result beyond samsara, or cannot make contribution towards that wealth, towards a store of merit that could result beyond samsara. But there is an exception. But there is an exception. Even in such situation, when you engage in merit, there is a possibility for some merit to contribute, to be deposited. So let's say some merit to be deposited for our own liberation, even within such a mental quagmire, such a mental almost depredation. And that is when you happen to be engaging in some merit associated with the field of merit, associated with a stupa or the statue or a relic of a field of merit. There are possibilities that done in association with them, even in the absence of these factors of practice, such as bodhicitta, understanding of emptiness, strong renunciation. Even in the absence of them, there's the possibility that some of the merits that you engage in could even go far to contribute to liberation. So I just wanted to bring that up, some kind of a mystery aspect. And to the extent you are comfortable, you kind of make that part of your practice. And then as one develops in one's understanding, one will become even more open and more comfortable with that. So Tsongkhapa mentions this and then kind of says that these are, it's almost like these are like a expert's advice or an experienced practitioner's advice from their own experience, a secret advice that he's sharing. And then associated with that, I wanted to bring this aspect of working, while working on one's practice, work also on how to have even stronger, clearer, surer sense of trust in the Buddha, in the Dharma, in the Sangha, more particularly in merit fields such as beings, such as Buddha, external Buddha, an external Arya being. It is so important to work on that aspect of the path also. Because, and likewise towards one's teacher, to the extent possible, work on one's perception of the teacher, sense of respect, sense of reverence, sense of value towards the teacher, towards the Buddha, towards the Sangha. Of course, also towards our own community members. Because to the extent one has purer, more trusted, more more open sense of reverence, appreciation towards them. To that extent, one will also benefit in one's practice. One will also make progression on the practice. That's the reason why Atisha very much emphasized Depa, which would be Depa, faith, for the lack of a better term. says that with that kind of of course, one has to work on kind of developing that on a more informed, rational ground to the extent possible, but at the same time, allow for giving the benefit of doubt in the absence of any kind of a clear understanding, yet at the same time, in the absence of, or in a clear understanding, yet not 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 giving way to any negative leaning. Instead, kind of sees that gap, open space of no clear understanding, and kind of turn it into something advantageous for oneself in generating trust and appreciation. Because to that extent, one would benefit, and very often the slow progress is very often due to our own lack of a stronger, purer perception towards Buddhas, the Arya beings, towards one's teachers. And in a way, it is understandable. The stronger kind of a sense of reliance, sense of appreciation, of course, to the extent possible, one has to work it on the basis of well-founded grounding and understanding and whatnot. And for that, one has to really understand this. One has to study the text so that when we begin to see what kind of qualities Buddhas have, what kind of qualities a teacher could be having in alignment with those of the Buddhas, what ways they are working. So when we think of the qualities of the Buddhas, we will be also well furnished in kind of thinking of it in multi-pronged way, multifaceted way, and thus be as rich in our appreciation of their qualities. So just merely living to what you call living into accidental or accidental occurrence is not enough. One has to work on knowing what different aspects of Buddha's qualities are, and then kind of appreciating the Buddha by thinking along those lines in a much more rich, resourceful way. And that way, the sense of appreciation, trust, value, and of course gratitude will all open up, and to that extent, the strength of one's practice will be. So I wanted to bring some semi-mystery things in the world to kind of give thought to work on, because they do not have to remain mystery like that all along, I assure you. And the way to build one's strength on that is by studying, by reading, by studying, exposing yourself to more readings, whatnot. That way, so many things will come up, and that will add to the resource of approaching them. But in the meantime, also allow for, at the very least, allow this, allow for a sense of trust, faith, to the extent one can, right? To the extent one can, even in the absence of a well-informed understanding, for the very fact that at least you do not let that space be taken by a negative thought, which would be worse. So like that. These are supposed to be preliminaries of, or just just taking most of the time. Yeah, the other thing today, the main thing for the most of the time left that I was thinking of sharing today is about virtue, keva, virtue. In Asanga's text, by the way, Asanga is somewhat similar to Buddha Ghosh in Pali world. Asanga is like the Buddha Ghosh. He's for the Sanskrit tradition, like Buddha Ghosh was for the Pali tradition. Was very revolutionary, and yeah, he really kind of, as he was one of the two main Mahayana teachers to be prophesied by Buddha. Not just prophesied of their coming, but in terms of what they would do, what their contribution and role will be. In the case of Asanga, that of really reviving the method aspect of the Mahayana teachings, more particularly in terms of the view, in terms of their philosophical outlook, that of Chittamatra. So he was the one who revived it and really kind of propounded it. But then many of his texts really deal with the method aspect of the path in a very, very elaborate and expansive way. So in his text called Mumbakundi Abhidhamma Samuccaya, by the way, it is a wonderful text. It's like an encyclopedia of so many different aspects of the method practice, together with the wisdom aspect, though confined to the Chittamatra perspective. By the way, usually the understanding is he was himself not a Chittamatrin. He was a Madhyamika. He was a Madhyamika, and that is being authenticated from his commentary on Uttara Tantra. There he gets the time to flex his Madhyamika wings, the muscles there. In all other cases, he had to just make do or kind of be constrained by the Chittamatrin's perspective. Mm-hmm. So he was someone who was Madhyamika in heart, but had to play out the role of being Chittamatrin in most of his writings. So in the Buddhist world, we have some such thing as something being the intent of the text, but not of the author. And that speaks of how someone could be moved, carried, and motivated by compassion, solely for the benefit of others, not for what they could gain from that, what kind of impression they can give. So anyway, he talks about the keva, virtue. At certain point, he talks about virtue, non-virtue, and neutral. He talks about virtue, non-virtue, and neutral. And he talks about it in such a way that he speaks of 13 virtues, 12 non-virtues, and I think 14 neutrals. We're not going to touch neutrals and non-virtue. We're going to touch the virtue. 13 virtues. Of the 13 virtues, because to help us in thinking of virtue in a much more resourceful, rich way, not just virtue, but virtue in a very, very resourceful, multi-pronged way. By the way, virtue usually is understood as an act or a mental attitude that has the potential to eventually give rise to joy and happiness. In some texts it says give rise to a result that one would desire, that one would want. But usually it is joy and happiness. Virtue is something that has the potential of giving rise to joy and happiness. Non-virtue is just the opposite, right? So speaking of 13 types of virtues, there's the first 5 ones which are considered to be the main, you call main stations or the main categories. Out of them, one is called, okay, let's talk of this 13. Out of them, the first 5 are the main. We usually, when we speak of the divisions of virtue, we always speak of those 5, assuming that all the rest are kind of subsumed in them in one way or the other. But when we deal with all the 13, it helps us in seeing virtue in a much more varied, diverse form. So that's what I thought would be good to. Okay. So the first one is called natural virtue, or should we say virtue by its very nature. Virtue by its very nature. So what are virtues by its very nature? So the 11 virtuous mindsets, mental factors, those are virtuous by their very nature. That means they do not have to depend on something else for them to be virtue. By their very nature, they are virtuous. So that will include mindsets like Depa, right? Faith or trust in the way we spoke. And then more importantly, what we are calling integrity, the sense of restraint by reason of oneself, sense of restraint against misdeeds by virtue of oneself. That's integrity. The sense of virtue, the restraint against misdeeds by reason of others. It could be by reason of others in the sense that how I would look to them, how it would impact them, how it would influence them. And because of those reasons, one kind of restrains oneself from misdeeds. So likewise, the 11 virtuous mental factors are what we speak of as virtues by nature. Is that clear, right? Virtues by nature. Now, second one is called virtues by association. Virtues by association means, so when a virtuous mind is generated, many of the mental factors generated manifest at the same time do not have to be necessarily virtuous by their very nature. They could be present in other mental states, such as negative mental states, whatnot. But when they are present in concomitance with a virtuous mind, they also become virtuous. And they become virtuous not by their very nature, but by association. It's like having a good company. So that's virtue by association. I'm going to go 1 minute, one topic for 1 minute. The third one is called Chesudelva. I don't know what you call it. Chesudelva. No, this is not Chesuirang, Chesudelva. Delva is as association. Chesudelva is after association. Let's call it after association. Or aftermath association. Pardon? After the fact. Virtuous by being a residue. Let's call it like that. Virtuous by being a virtuous residue. Let's call it virtuous residue, or virtuous something that follows something but remains virtuous. Anyway, let's call it like this: something that follows virtue, or something that is virtue by following a virtue. Let's call it like that. So basically, what it is pointing to is our bhakya, the latencies left by positive qualities. So by very nature, these latencies are latencies. Latencies are always neutral. But latency left by virtues has a special quality than what latencies left by non-virtuous qualities. So And these latencies, they follow after virtue, they follow after what has deposited them, and thus they are called follow-up virtue. And they are virtues in the sense, not virtues by nature, but virtues in the sense that what what precedes those latency in terms of leaving that imprint is virtuous. What is left in the form of latency has this potential of generating virtue, positive joy, happiness later. And because of that, that latency is posited, situated between two virtues, one which led to it, other what it leads to. And of course, the very important virtue is virtue by way of motivation. And this is very important to remember. Here, it says that any mental and any verbal and physical action that one engages in, even in the name of Dharma, whatnot, there's no guarantee for them to be virtuous. It's always dependent on the motivation. One could be doing outwardly Dharma thing, but which would become non-virtuous because of completely skewed motivation of competition, of jealousy. Oh, such things could happen. There's no, one has to be always on the guard of this. Even we being in a monastic, we could, just as Venerable sometimes says, you buy this, you buy this, along with this comes the hell of it, right? The hell with it. Likewise, even with Dharma, so-called Dharma association, it can come with the hell about it. So this kolung, this motivation part is so important. Then there is something called Döntampe Keva. Döntampe Keva, by the way, Döntampe means ultimate, but here Döntampe Keva is either emptiness or cessation. By nature, they are not Keva, they are not virtuous, because they are permanent things. Right? One, that they are permanent. Did I say because they are permanent? Should I take it back? Okay, I'll leave it there. Okay, by nature they are not virtue. They are neutral. But they are called ultimate virtue in the sense that there are such things, there are such phenomena which can only appear in the eyes of a wisdom understanding emptiness. Thus, they are phenomena that are present in the eyes of an ultimate wisdom. And thus, they are called ultimate virtue. Something which has something virtuous about them in landing oneself to a state of full freedom from the afflictions, and at the same time something that doesn't that okay, simply put, that appears, that still can withstand, if you will. Withstand is not the technically right term, but they still can withstand the focus of ultimate wisdom. Okay, I covered the main virtues, the first 5 ones. So okay, we'll definitely have time. Next time we can cover the remaining virtues, right? The remaining virtues are subsets of them, but knowing them will be very important, very helpful to get a much more diverse, multifaceted view of virtue, so that one could remember that yes, this way of doing is also virtuous. This is also virtuous. I could do this. I could do this. Do this like this. So with this assurance, I will leave it here. We would have time to discuss over lunch and all our other sessions, and also during other sessions of sharing. So, no hurry.